Hello and welcome to the future of classical music. I'm David Taylor, and this is my show about big ideas and the people behind them. Today, I'm talking with Joe Perkins, creative director at Chaptr, spelled Chaptr, who are a web design agency that specialises in a UX or user experience-led approach. The internet is going through some big changes at the moment. Web traffic from search engines is already in decline, and the world of AI and AI overviews and search results means this decline will only increase in time. It's going to be harder and harder to get people to visit our websites and engage with us on the internet. In order to be successful, websites are going to have to adapt. I thought that Joe would be the perfect person to talk to about the future of websites and the internet. I previously collaborated with Joe and Chaptr in working on the website for Leeds International Piano Competition, and was fascinated in their UX-led approach and the impact it can have for organisations of all sizes and even individuals. In this chat, we talk about the role of websites in cultural organisations, the importance of user experience and stakeholder engagement, how to write a strong website brief, what makes an effective homepage, the impact of AI and Google Zero on website traffic, the growing importance of mobile-first design and payment tools like Apple Pay, how smaller organisations and musicians can build powerful websites on a budget, and most importantly, why accessibility, inclusivity, and digital strategy are essential for the future of the arts. Right, that's enough from me. Let's jump in. Hi, Joe. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's great to have you here.
Hi, David. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Fantastic. So today we're going to be talking a lot about websites. I thought it'd be best just to hear from you. What is Chaptr, the company you work for, and what is it that you do?
Sure. So yeah, Chaptr is a UX and design based web agency, and we work mostly in the creative arts and culture space. So that spans sort of classical music, heritage, art galleries, theatres, that sort of thing. And we, our I guess our job is really to help the sector get to grips with websites, and how they can work effectively. We tend to see a gap between what these organizations offer in real life and that great experience that their audience gets versus the experience that they have online. And I think our job is to try and bridge that gap. So bring kind of the reality and the digital world together, and make sure there's not quite as big a gap between the two, so that there's a more joined up experience across the brand.
Fantastic. And I thought you'd be a great person to chat to as part of this podcast, because you mentioned at the beginning, Chaptr is a UX, user experience and design
Mm.
led web agency. And we collaborated together on a project with Leeds International Piano Competition
Yes.
and redesigning their website. And I was really taken back by this user experience led approach. And so I think there's so much value there we'll jump into in a second, but that's why I thought you'd be such a good person for this.
Yeah.
But before we get to the more in-depth sort of user experience, complicated side, I thought we'd start off with sort of the nuts and bolts. So in essence, what is the point of a website, both for musicians, individuals, ensembles, but also large cultural organizations?
Yeah, and I think that you said about user experience, and the point of a website is really determined by what you want your users to be able to achieve, what you want your audience to be able to do, right? So that's kind of where you need to start with the thinking. A lot of the time, the website is the result of a lot of stuff that happens before. So it's not. We're kind of, we think about, we need a new website, and it's just this thing that you go to and it's on the internet, and you put some stuff on there and hope that people kind of connect with it and do what you want them to do. But actually it starts further upstream, understanding who who you want to come to your website, or who's already coming, what you want them to do when they get there, how you want them to feel, how you connect with them, the kind of content that you want to engage them with, and then how you get them to that end goal, which sometimes it's not even clear what that is on a lot of the websites we see. So yeah, the point of the website is it's multifaceted really, but it's about creating an introduction to your organization and a clear pathway to the objectives that you're trying to set out to achieve as a as an organization really.
Fantastic. I think it's a really powerful thing, especially that it's bespoke to each organisation, and you sort of touched in the introduction as well about it being a reflection and a touching point for what you're doing in the real world as well. It's not just purely something separate; it's that connective side of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, Definitely. So we mentioned this UX approach that you have. The world we live in, it's now easier than ever to have a website, a social media presence, to get started online with more and more free tools. Why would someone, whether it be an individual or an organization, want to work with a web agency rather than just jumping in and doing it themselves?
Mm, that's a good question. And I think the answer to that is the consultation that comes along with it and the education element to it. As you said before, we worked together at the on the Leeds piano competition website, and from that you can kind of see that there's different phases to actually rolling out a website. And what an agency does is helps to helps you to get a better idea of the why behind the website part, um, and really look at undertake a discovery phase so they can kind of challenge your assumptions, look at the brief you've provided, see if there's any gaps in the brief, um, to help you get to the right answer. A lot of the time, what you think you want from a website isn't actually what you need from a website, and I think that's what a good agency will help you do, is to challenge some of the ideas and notions to um, keep being objective and bring it back to the user. Sometimes when you're working on a website, there's lots of different stakeholders involved, and when you've got a really good brief that the agency can help you refine and deliver, it becomes less personal, and sometimes a website can be quite a personal endeavor, and sometimes the more important person has the louder voice. But if you keep it objective and you keep referring back to the brief and the objectives of what we're trying to achieve, it's a great way to make sure everyone has a voice at the table. And when we work with people, we conduct stakeholder interviews, so we try and understand how the website needs to work based on the different people in the organization. So someone in finance might have different needs to someone in marketing. Someone in the box office might have different needs to the CEO, for example. So we look at how the website needs to work for all of the stakeholders, but primarily the audience is a big stakeholder too. So that the understanding like user personas, who these people are, you know, are they individuals coming to enjoy a show, or are they families looking for something to do? And are you trying to cater to both types of groups there? And that's what an agency will help you do, is really get to grips with the why, but also to make sure it's a really considered representation of the different people that have an important say on what the website might need to do.
Definitely. I think it's really fascinating you touched on having different stakeholders, and that's very much the sort of, I think, a prevalent thing. And for some people, it might be the most important thing to have X on the website, and actually, it may not be the top of the hierarchy. So
Mm,
straight away, I was thinking of, say, for example, sometimes it's board members, and we must have our mission statement as the first thing on the homepage. And realistically, is that going to be something of your charitable mission statement written in a corporate fashion going to be the most interactive and interesting thing for an audience member meeting you for the first time? And it may not always be the case in that scenario.
exactly that. Yeah, and there are often, like you say, board members, trustees, um, people who are controlling the purse strings as well, that want to have a say, but you might not even necessarily be dealing directly with them throughout the process. And I think there's a political element of diplomacy that an agency brings to a project like a website, because it's amazing how excited and passionate people become, and our job is to really rein that in and try and find what the challenges are and use creativity and design to solve them, and re-articulate what all the problems are coming at us into a kind of solution that feels uh, clear and concise and has a good narrative or message running through it as you interact with the website.
Definitely. I think there's also some extra positives from being on the receiving end that I sort of encountered, and that when we came to you with the brief for that website, I thought that I had a great handle on what we wanted the website to be and a kind of sense of how it would work on all these things. And through that discovery process and the interviews, what I found actually was both you and the team at Chapter were almost challenging us to think of more ways we could deliver more effective ways of providing value to people, and almost sort of seeing a potential that we didn't necessarily see ourselves. And
Mm.
that's something I found really fascinating, that from this, you're almost like, not just we will fulfill a brief, it's okay, this is what we actually can see being your true goal of where you want to be, and this is how we might be able to get there, which I thought was a really fascinating positive that is something that an individual or an organization couldn't really do in isolation.
Completely. And I think having that understanding of the sector like we do as well, you know, we see so many briefs, we interact with so many clients in the space. We understand challenges that you may not be aware of yet, that are probably going to come up further down the line because we've encountered them before. But we also understand what might make a good feature, you know, based on what's been successful in the past and things like that. So I think it really does help, working with an agency, 1. 2, if you can find an agency that's really got experience in the field, um, it brings a whole new level of, sort of strategic thinking to the table that you wouldn't necessarily get from, an agency that just knows websites, because that's important and it's got its own process. But if you understand the industry too, it brings a sort of a contextual advantage because we kind of get the world that you're living in, you know, and we understand some of the pressures and the way the organizations work tend to be quite similar with the different levels of kind of sign off and that kind of thing. So all of that can really help bring about a smooth process. And like you say, it's often we really know what we want. Here's the brief. Um, and after the discovery, the brief has changed for the better, because it's challenged people to think a bit more outside the box or just reconsider things. And that's, you know, one of the challenges I remember with the leads was, um, and this is so common in this space, is trying to uh, find a way to create harmony between a kind of traditionalist audience and a classical approach to what we're trying to achieve, and to protect the kind of heritage of a brand, but also attract a contemporary, new, young, vibrant, fresh audience, and how can we visually articulate that? And that's something that we really enjoy the conversations around, because it gets people thinking about where the company is now and where it's trying to get to, but what it where it needs to be in the future as well, you know? How it needs to evolve to these new ideas and the new generation of audiences that are actually on things like TikTok, you know, and Instagram, and they're not uh, gonna discover you otherwise. Do you know what I mean? So we need to be thinking about them and how they interact with things, because otherwise we're not going to have a sort of vibrant looking future, are we, for these organizations, because they won't know how to connect with the younger ones that, you know, could bring so much, I think, to the sectors that we work in.
Very much so, and the internet is ever changing. That's something we'll be touching on in a
Yeah.
second, in terms of how websites and organisations in the digital space can adapt with all these trends that we then face. But there's one thing I wanted to run past you first that you just touched on, which was that you see a lot of briefs and a lot of tenders from organisations, so you've
Mm.
got experience to what it is. Let's say I'm an organisation wanting to put something out to tender to a website company. What makes for a good tender or a good brief for you as a design agency? What do you need to know, and what sort of are the common pitfalls that some people might miss off in that process?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think primarily we need to understand, um, so one thing is the visual brand identity. That's often not mentioned. So we need a new website. We want it to be great. but what about the kind of logo and the visual brand that you already have? Is that going to be changed? Do we need to adhere to those brand values? How much kind of creative direction is there available for the agency to run with it and kind of reimagine it? Because a lot of them are silent on the fact whether there's going to be a rebrand or not. And actually, it links quite closely to what we do with the website, is how your visual brand looks. So that's something that I think is important to include and talk about, perhaps just a little bit about whether, you're looking to retain it. Are you looking for a bit of a digital refresh? Or the fonts are a bit tired, but you want to mainly, I think there's a bit of trepidation about changing a logo. Um, but you don't have to always rip it up and start again. You can kind of take the logo and perhaps create a slightly refined version for the website so that you get the best result on the website and everything kind of leads from that. So that's one thing I would say. Um, you need to include the kind of a bit about your target audience as well. I think it's good to know the audiences. I mean, this comes out during the discovery anyway, but it really helps if you can give that context around who's going to be interacting with the site, who you're trying to connect with. Obviously, the main objectives, and why now as well. That can sometimes be missed. So it could be an anniversary coming up, or something like that. That tends to be the case quite a lot, but you know, that's important. Looking at things like the different features that you want to include on the site. Again, you might not know all of this, but it's going to give the web agency a good steer as to how to estimate if they know you're going to be using a CRM like Spectrix, for example, or perhaps you're going to be just using an existing ticketing system and linking out to it, and that changes the scope dramatically. What else do you need to know when you create? Would be helpful to let an agency know. Um, the budget. That is something that is so helpful for an agency and really for the client too, because it can save a lot of time. Um, and if you're a bit, if you don't know the budget at this stage, then you can usually find out a budget range, I think, and that just helps the agency to understand if they're a good fit or not right from the start. That's something that's, I would say, sort of 50% include a budget, 50% don't. And I think there's a fear that the agency will just grab the budget and say, "Oh, we'll go with that," and perhaps they're looking for the cheapest option. But that's a really dangerous game to play in web design. If you're looking just to get it done cheaply, then you will get usually a cheap website, and but you'll still probably end up spending thousands in the process. So it's an expensive thing to try and get the cheapest option. So a budget really helps an agency come up with a solution that fits. They could say everything you've asked for here is great, but within that budget, realistically, we can do this, this, and this, and not the whole lot. You'd be looking at an extra 5 or 10K if you wanted to do everything you've got there, and you can just have a much more open and honest conversation from the start. Things like hosting, where do you want the website to be hosted and maintained? Um, and by that, I mean when you get a new website, it needs to go live on the internet. It needs to be on the internet somewhere. And sometimes clients don't even know who hosts the site. They have to try and track down the details. So doing a bit of research to make sure you understand who's currently hosting the website, and that you can get access to things like the domain. Those are all little things that can be missed, and then you go to put the website live and they suddenly realize that they don't have access to the domain, for example. So um yeah, I think those are probably the main things. You can include some reference sites as well if you've got like an example of the kind of thing you're trying to achieve. Again, that will help the agency see if they're a good fit, if it's got their kind of design DNA, if it's something that they would be able to produce for you. um I think, and it varies depending on if you're a cathedral or a orchestra. There are slight nuances, but generally speaking, that's kind of the core information. And I would say I would even insist on an introductory call with the agency before you ask for a proposal. That will really help you understand if they're the kind of team that you could work with. And they're going to take the brief that you've got then, or a good agency will, and will highlight any gaps and help you to improve that brief.
Fantastic. I think it's all really good advice. I think in some scenarios, people will be creating these briefs without necessarily having done them before, or it's
Exactly.
not something where you may have experience in making one that's as positive as possible. But that's all fantastic. So, looking then ahead to the future, the internet is changing. I've been fascinated with this concept called Google Zero from a website called The Verge,
Mm.
which in essence is looking to the end of search traffic and the end of Google. And that's premised on one, the increase of just general spamming Google with people, say, for example, spamming affiliate link websites, people who are then sort of pushing people down rankings because of domain authority and different things. If you realize or if you go and search on the internet, you may realize the first 4, 5, 6 responses are either adverts or just general spam.
Mm.
And then also now we have the world of AI. So why would someone search Google if they can just ask AI what's on in London on Wednesday for music concerts, and it will tell you without having to scroll through all these things. And so basically the premise is that eventually traffic to websites from Google will eventually go to zero. So intrigued to have your thoughts as to sort of about that as a concept, and also if this is something that's coming into the future, how can cultural organisations prepare for it to make sure that people are coming to their website?
Mm. It's a really interesting question, and I think I think AI is going to change everything in the next 5 years. If you think what it's done in the last two already, it is going to be such a radical shift. I think in how we do things online, how we interact with technology. And I think when it comes to websites, I think Google will adapt. I don't think we'll see the end of Google for sure, because it it knows its place, and I think what it's going to have to do is get on board quite quickly. Um, I think I think we'll probably see a decline in ad results. Like you said, that's not particularly useful for users, really. I don't click on them. Um, the the AI generative search results at the moment are are more are really interesting. They're not 100% accurate at the moment, but for example, we could Google um, what's on at the theatre in London this weekend, and it will give you a list of results within the AI search results option at the top. So that the user queries, websites are going to have to find a way to evolve to answer those queries. Um, Otherwise, they're not going to be listed, because what we want when we Google something, like when we use ChatGPT, is an answer, not necessarily to so first of all, it was about clicking on the website, find information. Now we've got even lazier, and we want to know straight away, and that's what the AI search results are doing, right? They're telling us straight away. So brands need to find a way to answer these questions on their sites if they're going to stand a chance of, showing up. But even then, we're not actually clicking on the website. We're getting the answer we need from within the search results, right? So clicking through the click the visitor rate to websites is going to really go down, especially as a result of Google, I think. What can we do about that? Firstly, I think we still need to adapt, so our websites are structured in a way that that the AI bots can interpret and provide results, meaningful results for. But your your question around what else should we be doing, really, I think, is what we're asking. How can we protect our brands and make sure that we still show up to our audiences? And I've been thinking about this, and I think it's about creating fandom. And I think in order to do that, we need to do it on social channels. And I think it's going to be about creating fans and loyalty and connection through showing our personality on the platforms where we still can reach people, and then linking back to the site that way. Um, that's my suspicion, and that means that brands are going to have to get better at doing it, and they're also going to have to get ensure that they're if they do have a new website and it looks great, that it's not then lost on their social channels. That brand, there's a seamless brand continuation, and all their assets look slick. Their design assets look slick and smooth and engaging. Um, yeah, and I think they're gonna have to find budgets for this kind of thing, David. I really do.
Yeah. Well, my sort of thinking around it is that maybe in all of this, the website's almost the solution. And that historically we've been using websites just, in essence, to list events, find ways to buy things, and they're very functional,
Yep.
rather than thinking that the website could be a destination in itself. And I love that you use the word fandom.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people are now slightly more aware of social media as something that may not be all positive, and they're wanting to get away from algorithmic content. The idea of, instead of, say, for example, going to Joe's Orchestra on social media, I'd just love to go to Joe's Orchestra on their website and engage
Mm-hmm.
there, and it's fully curated in the space, and actually that
Yeah,
there's something of value there.
completely.
We
Yeah.
slightly actually touched this on with the project with Leeds, with creating a media hub, and that was somewhere where you could have filtered and curated content rather than just hopefully find it on YouTube and that side of things.
No, you're completely right, and I think what the social channels will be useful for is attracting people that don't already know the brand or haven't already been there. But if people already know the brand and they can just go direct to the site, or perhaps the website's promoted more at in-person events, then that's going to be a way, like you say, once you get them on the site, it's all going to be about retention then. And I think there are lots of different ways that brands can do that. And at the moment, it's more like an archive of information on a lot of websites. And every time someone's got something interesting or they think that's interesting, it's like, oh, we should put this up on the website without a real consideration for where it's going, where it fits into the user journey. And before you know it, it's like you've got a whole room of people talking at once at you when you walk in. And that's how these websites are starting to feel. And when that happens, where do you look first? Who do you focus on, you know? How do you take anything in? So we need to treat our websites like we're having a conversation with someone, and that needs to be um, articulate, interesting, engaging. You know, you want to leave with a good impression, and you can signpost them to other interesting people. But trying to talk all at once is what we often see as a real problem, and probably one of the biggest challenges to solve. And I think that again is where good UX comes in.
Really good points. And so, taking that to the next step,
Mm,
websites are the destination. It's where we can have our relationship with our audience. The first port of call for any audience member coming to a website for the first time is the homepage. So,
yes.
with this in mind, what makes for a good homepage?
So a homepage has to have a, as soon as you kind of get there, there needs to be a hero section, and the hero section is basically the first part of the page above the fold before you scroll down, and that is your opportunity to say sort of, hello, this is who we are. We're introducing ourselves. You've landed here. You're in the right place. Um, welcome. Continue to engage, right? As you scroll down. And once you get past that section, you do want to try and connect in that section. I'm not a big fan of having like too much going on, too many options, too many things scrolling across the screen. I think less can be more with that introductory section. You can make a real impact. The next thing you want to do is segment the user depending on who they are. So as they scroll down, have they come to check out your events? Um, have they been to an event before and they've come to donate? Have they come to just have a browse and learn a bit more about the brand? And you know, are they looking for guidance from you as to kind of where to go next on the site? And that's where your user personas come in. So you look at who you think is going to be landing on your site, and then you try and segment the user by giving them different pathways through the site quite quickly. Um, I think that with a homepage, it's kind of I think less is sometimes more. Um, I think but the structure should be clean and logical. It should help users, like I said, self-identify and quickly find what they need. But you don't need a lot of content here. You need the right content there's a combination of sort of style and substance. Um, you need to be prioritizing the mobile user experience as well on the homepage. Um, and make it easy to they should be able to get to where they need to go from your homepage within 1 or 2, maximum 3 clicks, really. Um, so yeah, I would really think about trying to connect with people emotionally, but also striking the balance between uh, keeping a clear user journey, and don't try and do too much on the homepage. I think that's where we fall down. We think everything's important and we try and put it all on the homepage, but actually we need to relentlessly prioritize. And you could have like a spotlight feature section on the homepage, right? That can change. It could be dynamic, so you can decide if you've got an important show coming up that you want to promote that for the month, and that could be like front and center under the hero section, and that can change depending on what the feature news might be, you know. So yeah, that's kind of how I would approach a homepage.
Really good points. And I think it's really interesting you mentioned about mobile optimization as well.
Yes.
Sometimes, particularly cultural organizations, you find that they're not, even though we're in a mobile heavy landscape. I know I'm asking you this off the cuff, but do you have sort of an estimation of how much traffic is mobile rather than desktop in terms of as a wider society? Is it sort of 50%, 25%? Ballpark
No, I
figure?
would
Something
say
I
I
won't
would
hold you to as a.
no, but my inclination is it's more. I would say
Oh, really?
it's over 50%. Yeah, and I think you know, think yourself, David. Last time you went to perhaps book a ticket for somewhere, the likelihood is you're probably sat on the sofa, or you know you're finally in a place where you can give it some headspace, and that's usually gonna be on your phone, especially if you work at your MacBook all day. Most people tend to close it, or your laptop or your computer, and walk away from it, and they do the things that they want to do a lot of the time in the evening. Um, Now that also means that we have to meet the user intent, and if the user intent is that they're on their phone and they want to book a ticket, you have to reduce friction, all the friction from that process. If it becomes convoluted and they're filling out forms and the form's failing, and then they get through and then you ask them to donate rather than buy a ticket, and the experience is kind of not joined up, you're going to lose them. So something that's been quite slow to adopt for this sector is like Apple Pay, Google Pay. Like, imagine if you could go onto the website, see the event, that looks really good, I want to go to that. Pay on Apple Pay, click, click, done. That's what we want now. So I think it is a case of don't make them do the legwork, and perhaps we fall into the trap of, as organizations, of being a bit lazy and assuming that of course people will want to come, they'll buy a ticket, you know, but actually that might work for a certain one type of your audience. Perhaps the more traditionalist audience will still go on their computer and book a ticket. But if you're looking to attract fresh blood, you know, they're going to want to do it on their phone, and they're going to want to use Apple Pay and check out quickly, because our attention span is constantly dwindling, and we need to be
Definitely. And it's
really, David, it's about having empathy for the users, even if it's not a world we want to see or a world we want to think is happening. That's where we are. So we need to understand how busy people are today. We're doing more and more. Things can be done more quickly with AI, so we can squeeze more in. We're absolutely exhausted. If we're going to go to see a classical show or the theatre, then we need to be able to do it pretty quickly.
definitely. And just touching on your point about Apple Pay, I think there's also that level of added security, which is a real comfort to people. I hadn't realised until I had a slight banking fraud issue, which fortunately was all completely okay. But because I tried to do a purchase through Apple Pay, there was a second tier of security, in essence, that meant that people weren't able to access my bank. So
Yes.
that was something I didn't know existed. But also then off the back of there, I'm now hyper vigilant, being like, I will not put my bank details in. I just want to pay Apple Pay. Um,
That's such a good
but I
point.
think you're it's something I had no idea about until I had a small panic attack while some sort of phishing scam.
Yeah,
But yeah,
to
that
lean
for
on
me going
to
forward
lean
has
on
been
to lean on that security angle, I think, you know, to get the protection from like Apple, like you say, it's not an easy one to hack that. So if you don't actually have to type your card details into a user interface, and it's all just rerouted on Apple side, not only is it quick, it's more secure.
Definitely. It was really fascinating from my side, and I love that you mentioned as well that people are buying tickets sat on the sofa. I didn't realize that I'm potentially an outlier in my friendship group because when it comes to things like flights, hotels, and stuff, for me that's like a big computer job. And
Yeah.
recently had that conversation with friends who were all laughing at me because like, why don't you just do it on your phone? Why don't you use a computer for anything apart from work?
Well,
And for me, that was mind blowing. So all of a sudden, I feel
yeah.
like I'm now a
I think
pensioner.
well, anecdotally, I think we're kind of sitting on the fence because it's nice to have the kind of big screen and seeing what you're doing. But I think we're the last of that type that might still be doing a bit of both. I think the generation that's, the next generation is just doing it on their phones. Um, so yeah, the websites really need to work on phones, and they really need to be set up for a mobile, a seamless mobile experience, when it comes to the transactions as well.
No. Well, I know that at Chapter you work primarily with cultural organisations and institutions, but I just wondered if we could touch on slightly what websites would be like for musicians. What could potentially individuals or maybe small ensembles learn from these lessons that large cultural organisations also have when it comes to their websites?
Yeah. So I think one thing we find is that, we there are lots of different size organizations across the sector, and for that reasons the budgets can vary quite wildly. Um, but there is stuff you can do from a small organization's point of view and still make an impact with your website, absolutely. And I think that it's about keeping it simple, right? Strip it back, focus on like a clean design, strong imagery, clear calls to action, and good storytelling. And I think if you haven't got, the budget to be splashing out on the fancy CRMs and the big features, you can still tell a good story. You can lead with the narrative, and I think in this sense, kind of less is more. I don't think you need the flashy features. You just need clarity, aesthetics, and a strong sense of your message. And there's a lot you can do with a limited budget to move from where you are to where you want to be. We've seen organizations make really huge strides just by tightening their narrative and simplifying the structure of their website. So that's kind of what I would look to do. You can take inspiration from some of the big sites, but I really think that kind of simplifying it, if you've got 100 pages on your site that don't really link together and there are a lot of dead ends, try and bring it down to 10 pages. Like, put the rest in an archive, have a blog section, and really consider your homepage and your message. And there's still a lot you can do, definitely.
Fantastic. That's really good advice. So just to wrap
Sorry,
up, we're
just to add to that, David, I would just say as well,
I know,
like,
please.
if you're looking, if there is still an element of what you're doing, like you're a small ensemble, like you say, maybe trying to create a clear pathway to donations could really help, So prioritizing, I really understanding the goals and how the website could work for you, like really work for you as a musician or a smaller kind of outfit, and then going from there, I think.
Really good advice. Fantastic. Well, to wrap up, we're now going to finish on the questions that everyone gets at the end of the podcast interview.
Sure.
So, nice and easy one to end on for you. If you could change one thing in the industry, what would it be and why?
Change one thing in the industry. It would probably be to be more open-minded when it comes and actually lead more boldly and fearlessly with inclusivity and accessibility, I think. I don't know if you want me to elaborate.
Yeah, I realised we've not actually touched on things like
Mm,
accessibility with websites. It'd be great actually if you could.
I think we want, if we want to, for instance, take classical music, if we want to reach a broader audience, then we need to help audiences see themselves in what we're trying to do, and different types of people see themselves in what we're trying to do. So that's, I think, from an inclusivity point of view, it's about um, being willing to take the risk on diversification and not just using it as a buzzword, but actually you know, creating a strategy and a plan around how we're going to attract new audiences, different types of people, and really make it so classical music can be enjoyed by everyone, and perhaps not just people that would come and visit in person, you know. Um, so that's probably one thing I would urge that people. I think it's happening. It is happening, but I would love to see more of that. Yeah, and accessibility again is a really important thing for the arts and culture sector, and it's not there are the technical elements of accessibility on a website. So, you know, making sure that different types of people can use it, they can actually read, you know, see the images, interact with the content, whether they're blind or deaf, they should still be able to use the website. And so implementing the tools and creating the site in a way that means everyone can benefit from it is really important. And we are again seeing steps in the right direction there. But accessibility can also mean like um and inclusivity can mean how the types of font you use, right? So if you're using like a serif font, then you're definitely talking to a more traditionalist audience, perhaps. Or if you do choose a serif font, then you need to perhaps balance that feel with perhaps some colors that might be more approachable, you know? So I think the idea of I think it wouldn't be necessarily what I would change, but I would encourage more organizations to really think about accessibility and inclusivity.
Wonderful, fantastic point. And then, as a last one to end on, something a little bit more hopeful, what gives you hope for the future of classical music, and where do you see opportunity?
I think I love seeing brands like Manchester Collective, and what they're trying to do, and how they're trying to engage audiences by being a bit more, what's the word for it? Just they're just kind of like tearing up the rule book a little bit, I think, and they're changing the context, but they're keeping the music, the idea of classical music the same, and they're trying to put a contemporary twist on it. And I think that that helps me feel that even people that feel intimidated by classical music are still going to be able to access it. Um, so I think that excites me, and I think the more brands that look at trying to do that, and like I said, create fandom and perhaps um, tell the stories of their musicians, you know, and help you see the personality of the musicians and make them more relatable and identifiable. And I think that's gonna if we can continue down that path, then we're gonna be okay.
I'd like to thank Joe Perkins, Managing Director of Chaptr, for taking the time to join me on the podcast, and thank you for listening. If you'd like to let me know what you think of the podcast, any requests for topics, or in fact, anything else, you can email david@david-taylor.org or reach out on social media. You can find links to all of those at david-taylor.org. There, you can also find more blogs on the future of classical music. If you like the podcast, please share it with your friends and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I'll see you next time.